Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome our guest of honor, Dr. Jano Puttacheri, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and Ministry of Health. A very good afternoon to our guest of honor, Dr. Jano Puttacheri, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and Ministry of Health. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Singapore International Cyber Week 2024, Securing Smart Cities. My name is Kim Ann Tan. It's my pleasure to be your MC for this session. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us today. Now, we have a distinguished lineup of speakers joining us for this session, including our keynote speaker and our panelists. This event brings together government agencies, industry leaders, and cybersecurity experts to discuss and address the challenges in securing smart cities. Our focus this year is on the emergence of cyber-physical risks. We will explore how these risks impact our cities and how governments and industry leaders can collaborate to tackle these issues effectively, balancing usability, cost, and security. So without further ado, to begin this session, it gives me great pleasure to invite Dr. Jano Puttacheri, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Digital Development and Information, and Ministry of Health, to the stage to deliver his welcome address. Dr. Jano, please.
Distinguished guests, excellencies, colleagues and friends, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to join you at today's inaugural Securing Smart Cities event. About 2 weeks ago, our Prime Minister Lawrence Wong launched our refreshed vision for a Smart Nation 2.0, and did so in order for us to then think about what it will take for us to live up to our ambitions and to achieve our goals. We must continue to integrate digital technology into the way we work, the way we live, and do so that we can harness its potential, become more efficient, more sustainable, and ultimately more livable as a country and as a city, and so that we thrive. Technology has already enhanced many services that are central to our lives: power, water, transportation, payments, identity. We are familiar with what digital technology can do, the promises that it brings. There is a dark side to it: cyber attacks, vulnerability, data theft. As we rely more on digital technology as a smart nation, the attack surface will only grow and grow. And one key concern is indeed cyber-physical risk. Cyber attacks or digital disruptions spill over into the real world, into the physical world, and this results in real physical damage affecting lives. There have been examples of this around the world. You may be familiar with the ransomware attack in July 2024 on OneBlood, which provides blood donation and blood supply services to the southeastern United States. The attack forced OneBlood to switch to manual processes. This slowed down their operations, and it limited the availability of this life-saving resource. Hospitals were forced to implement blood conservation protocols, and some complex surgeries had to be rescheduled, potentially delayed. Earlier this year, we saw a very different type of incident. You will be familiar with what happened with CrowdStrike. A flawed software update issued, and then that subsequently crashed 8.5 million Windows systems globally. This wasn't a cyber attack. This wasn't, as far as we know, this wasn't a cyber attack or a cybersecurity incident in the conventional sense. But the disruption to essential services in many countries, in many sectors: air, land transportation, healthcare, financial services, government operations, retail, it highlights the payoff. If this was a cybersecurity attack, if this was something to be exploited and was exploited maliciously, it highlights the payoffs of trying to then disrupt these systems and create cyber-physical threats. These incidents affect trust, they affect the confidence that we have in digital technology, and ultimately, from the perspective of government, that trust affects how far we can go, how fast we can go, how fast we can seize the opportunities afforded by technology. So, in building a smart city, we cannot afford to neglect security and resilience. And that's why this idea of building trust is a key line of effort in Singapore's approach for Smart Nation 2.0. When Prime Minister spoke, that was the first item that we talked about, how trust is going to be a core pillar of our refreshed vision for Smart Nation 2.0 in order for us to then think about communities, growth, and ultimately thriving. But it starts with trust. And we will be doing more to secure Singapore as a smart city against cyber physical risks. We updated our Cybersecurity Act this year, first passed in 2017. This year we updated it to strengthen our safeguards for critical information infrastructure. We expanded the ambit of the law to include other digital infrastructure that we think are foundational to the digital economy and our way of life, such as, for example, cloud services and data centers. Looking ahead, we'll be introducing a new Digital Infrastructure Act to further address a broader set of security and resilience risks to our digital infrastructure. So not just the cybersecurity aspect of it, but the overall operations of these foundational digital infrastructure. To address things like physical hazards, fires, the cooling systems. These are not necessarily a cybersecurity issue, but if they fail, if they are somehow taken down, that foundational digital infrastructure will be affected in a very significant way. So we are exploring this and looking to introduce a new Digital Infrastructure Act. Our Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, CSA, also has for a number of years organized the Operational Technology Cybersecurity Experts Panel, OTCEP. This comes together to discuss the security of operational technology, OT systems, and this is directly relevant to cyber-physical risks. This year, CSA refreshed its OT cybersecurity master plan to drive the cybersecurity of our OT sector domestically. This includes plans to boost the manpower development and the competencies of the professionals in Singapore's OT sector. And we hope this will play an important role in helping to defend Singapore against the cyber-physical risks in the long term. And so the upcoming panel discussion that we will have here today will explore strategies for safeguarding our smart cities. We'll have experts discussing the unique challenges faced in securing cyber-physical systems and the strategies that governments and private companies have adopted to deal with these challenges. This type of panel, these exchanges that we have, the entire approach of Singapore International Cyber Week, this is vital for what we've been able to achieve so far collectively as an increasingly interconnected community of practice. And this is going to be vital for how we think about the future, comparing notes, learning from each other, sharing best practices, challenging each other's models of development and service development, and very importantly, identifying areas for potential collaboration going forward. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you here today. I wish you all a very fruitful, meaningful conversation, and all the best to our panelists as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jano. It is now my pleasure to invite our keynote speaker up on stage. Please welcome Dr. Madan Oberoi, Executive Director, Technology and Innovation at International Criminal Police Organization, better known as Interpol. Please welcome Dr. Madan.
Thank you, ma'am. Distinguished guests, Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. It is indeed my privilege to speak at this important session, Securing Smart Cities, during the Singapore International Cyber Week on the theme of emergence of cyber-physical risks. I would like to thank the Government of Singapore and the Cybersecurity Agency for giving me this opportunity. Before I proceed, a very quick review of what do we understand by the term cyber-physical risks. Generally, it refers to the threats arising at the intersection of cyber and physical space, and with the increasing blurring of the boundaries between cyber and physical space, this discussion is all the more relevant today. In practical terms, I can visualize 4 kinds of cyber-physical risks. The first one, where cyberspace manipulation leads to a kinetic attack. Maybe an example could be somebody playing around with the traffic signaling system, maybe causing a train collision. That kind of an attack can be a cyberspace risk. The second would be a cyberspace manipulation facilitating a physical attack, which may be somebody using the opening access to some of the critical infrastructure for launch of a physical attack. The third one may be a parallel cyber attack to a physical attack to magnify the impact. And the fourth one may be the other way around, where there's a physical attack on cyber infrastructure, maybe somebody cutting the undersea internet cables, those kind of things. Some of the known prominent cyber physical attacks include Ukraine power grid attack, German steel mill attack, Oldsmar water treatment plant attack, and the Saudi petrochemical attack. But what are the important features of these attacks, or the potential features of these attacks? I would say one, generally they are executed remotely, so multi-jurisdictional. They use very sophisticated models in terms of specialized, generally custom-designed malwares. And many times, because of the resource requirements, we suspect state actors to be involved in that. Critical infrastructure is the most common target for these attacks. And there's a high potential for collateral damage. I'll just dwell on this last point slightly more. What does a normal cyber attack result in? It can result in a monetary loss, economic loss, maybe breach of individual privacy, misinformation, disinformation, reputational loss, psychological loss. But in case of cyber physical attack, there's a likelihood of physical consequences, including human safety risks. This last consequence is not normally associated with cyber attacks, which are not combined with the physical attack. Now, this is a fact that also a fact that this is a potential which has been discussed. We haven't, as far as my memory goes, we haven't seen a significant cyber physical attack in which there has been a loss of life. But this may be due to either robustness of our system, maybe we can congratulate ourselves, but maybe also because of lack of ambition or imagination on part of the bad actors, or lack of guts on their part, or simply we haven't seen enough of the cyber physical attacks so far. But the question is, what is our tolerance level? We many times are okay with loss of monetary amount. Many times we see crimes being reported, where scams being conducted, where people lose money, and citizens are tolerant of those losses. Imagine a situation where a cyber physical attack leads to loss of lives. What would be the tolerance level in citizens? What kind of requests or the demands from citizens would be coming, and what kind of expectation would be from the government? So therefore, this becomes a much more serious issue which needs much more stronger handling. We are discussing this in context of smart cities, and in my view, they are particularly more vulnerable because of the high degree of interconnectivity, maybe use of so many IoT devices increases the attack surface, multiple entry points, and in some cases, use of AI by bad actors can also add further complexity to this situation. What can be done to prevent and combat cyber physical attacks? And I'm giving you the perspective from the law enforcement side. And traditional things which we have been doing in terms of protecting our cyber systems would be typically hardening of our security of our systems, hardware, software, continuous monitoring for incident detections, vulnerability assessment, penetration tests, incident response, secure supply chain, etc. One difference which will come, the way the law enforcement agencies respond to these. Normally, as a law enforcement agency, we are very comfortable in outsourcing parts of our response. outsourcing parts of our response to, and which I sometimes refer to as third-party policing. That is tolerable, that is acceptable when there are monetary losses, when there is information loss. But when it comes to loss of life, I don't think any state would be giving that or outsourcing the investigation of a loss of life case to a third party or maybe a non-policing agency, because that would be. So what does it mean for us? Probably we have been living in the comfort of being supported by third parties, external vendors, but probably now is the time to wake up for us, take up the ownership of this, because ultimately it is going to land up at our place. If there's some cyber physical attack, the law enforcement agency has to rise to the occasion and shoulder the exclusive responsibility of investigating and preventing that also. What we need to do that is to probably have a unified response team, intelligence collection, which is currently happening in silos in terms of the physical space intelligence collection and the cyberspace. Maybe time to fuse them together, cooperation and collaboration as in the other cases. Also simulation, preparedness, and global collaboration would become very important. What we have seen in the in the normal cyber crime cases, I did a small study in 2016 where I took the published figures of one of our member countries. So there was one report by one of the consultancy companies which estimated the number of cyber crimes in that country. Then there were published statistics by the National Crime Record Bureau of that country, which published how many cases were investigated by police, how many cases they were able to identify the culprit, in how many cases they were able to collect the evidence and send it for prosecution, and ultimately in how many cases conviction happened. Now this is a figure of 2016, and the percentage of the conviction as compared to the estimation of cybercrime cases was 0.33%. Now 0.33% means, in other words, that the cyber criminal was working with 99.7% confidence level that nothing is happening to him. With that kind of a confidence level, prevention is kind of a very difficult because there's no cost on attempt. Now imagine if these figures remain the same and we are imagining the cyber physical attack, where our tolerance level is almost zero. We are looking at a very, very critical situation. And that is a big challenge which we have to address. And I'll pause here and I will be looking with a lot of interest what our panelists will be, how they will be helping us to resolve this issue. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Oberoi. We will now transition to our panel discussion. So we are honored to have convened a distinguished panel of experts from both the government and the industry as well to share their unique insights on securing smart cities and addressing cyber physical risks. Having led initiatives that shape the future of urban security and technology, these speakers' diverse backgrounds will be sure to foster a vibrant and engaging discussion. So, to introduce our panel and moderate the discussion, please join me in welcoming Mr. Sim Feng Ji, Deputy Secretary, Digital Government, Ministry of Digital Development and Information, to the stage. Welcome, Mr. Sim. And while Mr. Sim takes a seat, allow me to also introduce you to our panelists for this discussion. We have with us Lieutenant General Michelle McGuinness, National Cybersecurity Coordinator, National Office of Cybersecurity for the Australian Government, Dr. Jerry Park, the Executive Vice President of Global B2B B2G Team, Mobile Experience Business at Samsung Electronics, Mr. Raimo Peterson, Head of Critical Information Infrastructure Protection at the Estonian Information System Authority, and last but not least, Mr. Sean Yang, Global Cybersecurity and Privacy Officer at Huawei Technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to welcome our speakers to the stage. Thank you, panelists. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to let everyone here know, after the first part of this panel discussion, we will open the floor to questions from the audience. So, to submit your questions, you can access Slido either by scanning this QR code, or if you can't scan it for some reason, you can go to slido.com and enter hashtag SSC. So we do encourage you to take this opportunity to interact with our experts. And with that, Mr. Sim, if you're ready, over to you.
Great. Really excited to be moderating the panel today. I think on the issue of smart cities, basically IoT-related devices controlling cyber-physical systems are all around us. If you took a lift today, you have encountered a cyber-physical system. If you took the MRT here today, you have encountered a cyber-physical system. Yet the risks associated with them are not very well understood, right? And there are significant consequences, as our earlier two speakers have highlighted. So I really wanted to thank Dr. Oberoi, as well as the Minister earlier on, right, for enunciating what are some of the risks associated and also some of the consequences that can happen. And if you've already seen this happening in certain jurisdictions as well. So this is becoming increasingly apparent, and I think our traditional cybersecurity concepts of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, while they do cover some of the risks associated, perhaps are incomplete in describing all the things that we have to think about, right? So it's a pretty new topic, not many reference materials in this space. We don't really have a very clear handbook. We sometimes try to apply the digital ones, but our cyber-physical vendors and look at it with some confusion because many of the areas and concepts are sort of relevant but don't fully apply. So this is a good opportunity actually for me to tap on some of our panel speakers who are the real experts in this field, right? Sean, actually, you have looked at this space for a long time. Do you want to talk a bit about how have these cyber-physical risks evolved with the integration of IoT devices, sensors, and even AI into many of our core critical infrastructure? Maybe you can also share some of the examples you have seen of the risks and also incidents or vulnerabilities discovered.
Okay, thank you to having me here. And just like Dr. Maiden just mentioned, and I think that as the ICT service or solution providers, and we focus on the cybersecurity for a long time. And actually, in fact, we didn't see too much evidence to see a cyber-physical attack. And I think probably there have two things. One side, we would like to see this really depends on the maturity of the digitalization in the different cities. And also from another side, I also think, and from the OT side, operation technology side, probably a lot of cities or smart cities operation organizations, they did not have too much awareness about this kind of cyber physical attack. Even something happened and they just reboot or restart the systems and they think the situation is gone. So I think this is just like you said, it's a pretty new challenge in front of us. And actually we see, and for example, now falling by the faster growth of the digitalization and intellectualizations, we see and the attack surface is getting more and more complicated. And also we can see the end-to-end vulnerability management also being impacted. I can give you one example. And see there have more and more e-vehicles are running in the street. And over the past few years, and we're working together with car makers and to see how we can enable them or how to work together with them to improve the callback. You can see now, if you're talking about day one, you're talking about vulnerability management, a lot of car makers, they even did not have the vulnerability management ideas. And in their traditional ideas, and if they found a vulnerability, they would just call the car's owners and drive the car back and then to refix the problem. However, now, and you can see even in China, they said clearly, and all this kind of vulnerability have to fix by OTA over the air. Then if the traditional car maker, and they need to satisfy all of that, and they need to totally reshape their business procedures and improve their capability on that. So this is the kind of thing. And also, I would like to see this kind of cyber-physical risk or cyber-physical attack, and probably and they have a big changing, and which is the citizen government or municipal government. They need to improve the collaborations, and sometimes we see a lot of municipal government, they have a siloed application, they have a siloed database. So now, if you want to improve this kind of collaborations and defense or collaboration operations, and they need to solve the problem to see how they can, merge all this kind of data from a different department, maybe in a lake or data lake or others, and to improve their capabilities. And I think that's my understanding.
Yeah. So you raised a number of interesting points, right? Like even being aware that you have to do this vulnerability assessment and some of the data challenges. But are there unique challenges with cyber-physical systems that you see, such as for smart traffic management? That's quite common. You spoke about EVs, utility grids, right? Those are critical infrastructure. Are there some unique challenges associated with those?
I think so. As a cybersecurity side, and honestly, we focus on cyber. We focus on the data, and we know many things about ransomware, and some data was leaked or data was attacked. And however, I would like to see in the CPS and disclose a new trends, which is all this kind of professional cybersecurity peoples needing to pay attention to the safety. And on another side, and all safety guys, I need to pay attention to the security. So this also reflects to the reality, which now the cyberspace and the physical space, their convergence is accelerating. I can give one example. Under our Huawei's business organizations, and we see clearly they have two organizations, the rest part, and they pay more attention to the cybersecurity. However, we see clearly the smart cars, you need to pay attention to the cybersecurity as well as the functional security, which means safety. And now, and as well as the digital powers. And now in the recent days, we also found out they have more and more AI's issue. Once you're talking about AI, the people's concern is not only the security, but also mainly focused on the safety. So I think it's for us. And if I say the most important challenge for us, that we need to combine the safety and security as one, to think about and how to fit this accelerating convergence for both sides. Yeah.
Yep. So that is actually an area that governments actually have an immense role to play, right? So if we left it to the private sector, typically, safety and security are issues, but you do also need to allow the market to function. And I think oftentimes governments also step in to address market failures related to safety and security in many sectors. And once you see the two spaces converge, I think it's also interesting to see what the role of government is. So Michelle, right? In the Australian case, what is the role of government, and what are some of your strategies in ensuring safety, security, and also privacy, right, of citizens within smart cities? Have you implemented specific measures? How do you think about this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I start by thanking you and Singapore for the fantastic events that have been held this week, and it's great to be here on stage. Look, I think Australia has a cybersecurity strategy with a grand vision that we will be a cybersecure leading nation. At the heart of that strategy, and I know so many of our partners and governments view this the same, this is about leveraging the unprecedented opportunity that is available to us of new and emerging technology and balancing it against the risks and the vulnerabilities. I think when we talk about smart cities, these two things come together in stark reality. As we look at bringing together IoT devices, OT, cloud sensors, and a lot of data, driving efficiency, driving climate policies, driving safety, security, comfort and convenience. These are the things we seek to leverage from these new opportunities, but at the same time we're bringing these things together and quite potentially introducing new or unknown vulnerabilities. As we bring these things together, if we haven't had safety at the heart of our consideration in standards and designs, then we're introducing vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities, the more we connect and become interconnected, and as our keynote speaker mentioned, even connections to our critical infrastructure, we can introduce vulnerabilities that can, of course, don't need a great amount of imagination to lead to fatalities and the second and third order effects. So governments and our strategy come at this through so many lenses. We can't just look at it for efficiency. We can't just look at it for convenience. It must be at the heart of it, secure by design, safety, and the other considerations that we seek to achieve. I think the other part of this, as you mentioned, is privacy and data. And it's so important, increasingly important, that we understand the data that is collected, the accumulation of data, where it's stored, who can access it, how secure it is, and what vulnerabilities that brings, particularly as we connect, as I said, IT, OT, cloud, sensors, things together. If we aren't ensuring that these things are interoperable, then we're introducing vulnerabilities. So government has a number of levers across, obviously, our strategy, our guiding path, but regulation and legislation, and of course enforcing standards. And to the specific example for Australia, we have, the government has put legislation to the Parliament just last week, which does include a minimum mandatory standard for IoT devices.
Right.
Now this impacts our smart cities as much as it impacts our smart homes. And the government's desire here is that the risk is not placed on Australians. It must sit with vendors. It must sit with industry that bring these capabilities. It shouldn't be up to an Australian to have to understand what risks they're bringing into their homes as they bring technologies that make our lives more seamless, more connected, and more efficient.
That's right. I think that's sort of updating our legislation to keep up with the times, right? So, for example, most consumers don't have to worry about the plugs that they use. So similarly, they shouldn't have to worry about some of the devices that they are using. But in addition to this, do you think there are other gaps in our policies or just the way we think about these issues?
Yeah, look, I think the way we think about it brings together so many lenses and requires strong coherence and harmonisation across all of the objectives that governments seek to run safe, secure and efficient societies, including our policies on climate, our policies on safety, security, and as I say, leveraging the immense opportunity that new and emerging tech brings without introducing vulnerabilities known or unknown. And of course, the data piece, it's too late to put that back into a box if we haven't considered the privacy from the very start. Right. And increasingly, there's an expectation across our societies that those that hold data have an obligation to protect data. And we must think of this in the integrated system that comes together as we build smart cities and even our smart homes.
Yeah, so to build on your point about working more closely together, right? So during the recent CrowdStrike incident that many of us perhaps are a bit too familiar with, what we found in the Singapore case is the sudden need for our cybersecurity agency to work with parties that they traditionally did not have to work with. So it does look like incident detection, incident management. It's also one area that you think we can work more closely, that I think all parties involved will work more closely on. I want to get your views on this, especially given your very interesting background across each of the different parts of both incident management, cybersecurity,
absolutely.
international collaboration.
So my role does, aside from coordinating across the government departments for a more resilient cybersecure Australia, I do have an incident response role. But if I can reflect very briefly on CrowdStrike, to me, at the heart of this, it was the criticality of a really strong public-private partnership, which is a foundation of our strategy as well. There are great things that governments are very good at doing, and there are things that industry are very good at doing, and we need to bring them together and do that which we do best. For our example, and Australia had a by coincidence of timing, it was a Friday afternoon. It's always a Friday afternoon when we had a call from, in fact, one of our national broadcasters to say they thought they were under a cyber attack. From that time, very quickly we were able to reach out to industry, connect with CrowdStrike themselves, who were incredibly transparent and responsive. Within 3 hours of the incident, through our enduring and strong and growing genuine public-private partnership, we had convened over 300 officials across industry and the Australian government within 3 hours to hear from CrowdStrike themselves. Now that partnership brought together people who were able to identify the second and third order effects. When were we going to have a supply chain grocery issue? At what point was our transportation not going to have food being distributed across our great and large nation? how were we going to alert our airports to some delays? It was a fantastic activity for the Australian government using our national coordination mechanism. And, heaven forbid it is a cyber incident. I think we were very lucky to have that activity to test our processes. It will not be so clear in a cyber incident, nor will we have a willing entity who can share with us exactly what's happened and support us through remediation.
Yes, actually we were quite lucky in the incident that the fix was also quite well known and made known to everyone very early on, right? And it was something that could be fixed, albeit requiring just human labor, right? It's not something that we had to develop along the way.
Still required a lot of work, but we had all the ingredients for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to seek Raimo's views also on the same topic, right? So international standards and also on Estonia's strategy on this.
Okay, if we talk about international standards, and I really think that it's a great tool if we use it, if we use them correctly, or if we make use them. And we need to think this way, that in the environment, the OT environment or operational technology environment is a bit different from the IT environment. And maybe the cybersecurity posture or the way of the mindset might be a little bit different there. And I think that the standards are a very good tool to fill the gap in the mindset. And there are basically standards are different standards. There are these management standards like ISMS, like ISO 27000 and all that. They are good universal ones. However, if I was a chief security officer, CISO of an organization, then I wish to have maybe more guidance. I wish to have more this kind of more specific controls, which would be helpful for me. Maybe not only for compliance, but helpful to implement the cybersecurity technical safeguards, to do network segmentation correctly, and to maybe even up to the OT domain specific safeguards, like I don't know, how do I ensure a remote access, or how do I manage a SD card of a programmable logic controller, or SIM type of things. And I think that we have less this type of guidance. And there are a few international ones out, like US NIST, and we do also have some few. And in Estonia, we have also a national standard, which actually covers both worlds. It covers this compliances, this ISMS, this management part. And it also includes several thousands of course, not everyone implements several thousand safeguards, but there are also safeguards, specific ones, which are really helpful for the implementer to take this methodological part, and then you come to the specific safeguards. And I really think that is quite helpful to improve the posture just in the OT domain. In Estonian standard, we do have special OT module with OT-specific safeguards. And I really think that this type of, the standard needs to be helpful, not just that compliance and you need to comply and you need to do it. That is my view on that.
Yeah, that's right. I think our experience in Singapore is very much the same as well, with the additional difference that OT systems tend to be one-way doors. Many of the decisions are hardware related, not really reversible, and oftentimes the hardware engineers tend to speak a very different language from software engineers, which tend to deal mostly with two-way doors. So I think some degree of international standards, some protocol for how they communicate and think about these issues, so that at least both sides have a common language and also a common checklist of things, but also some robust, some way of testing the devices so that it works will be useful. I wanted to pick up on Michelle's earlier point about public-private collaboration, right? I wanted to tap on both Michelle's experience as well as maybe Jerry's experience, because you also work very closely with the government, and maybe even Sean's experience, right? How do you think governments and industry leaders can collaborate better to identify and address some of these emerging cyber-physical threats? Some of the points that Raimo raised earlier about needing public-private partnership, but also OT-IT partnership. What are the frameworks or partnerships in your country that you think has been actually exceptionally useful? So Michelle spoke a bit about some of the crisis management mechanisms. We don't just want to do this in a crisis. What about even in peacetime? So maybe I could ask Jerry to talk first, and then maybe Michelle as well to give an overview.
So first of all, I want to thank the organizers of this panel for inviting me. This is obviously a very timely panel. I think more than ever, close collaboration between government and the private sector is very critical. And for one obvious reason, and that is, I think we can all agree in this room that technology is evolving at a very fast pace, whether you're talking about AI, machine learning, quantum computing, zero trust, robotics. Technology is evolving at a very fast pace. However, in a lot of countries, rules and regulations, they're having trouble keeping pace. And so I think it's critical more than ever for government agencies to work closely with the private sector so that they can share best practices, exchange innovative ideas. So in the end, the private industry can provide meaningful input that will enable government officials to craft very effective rules and regulations that will help us very effectively regulate advanced technologies, and furthermore, also provide very effective guardrails. And obviously for machine learning, AI, that is very critical. And so that's kind of my take on why it's so critical for governments and the private sector to work closely together.
Yeah. Michelle, you want to speak a bit about how you do this in Australia?
Yeah, look, I can't echo Jerry's comments about how fast technology is moving, and at the same time, vulnerabilities and cybercrime is moving equally fast. Whether it be criminals or state actors, this is a national endeavour, and we've identified that the whole nation must move to make us more secure, resilient. This is not something, as I said before, that government can do alone. The Minister for Cybersecurity has, at the release of the strategy, also convened an Executive Cyber Council, which brings together cross-cutting industry leaders and peak bodies to collaborate with key government officials and to really co-design ways that we can make our nation more resilient. It really is a true partnership, and we really are looking to ensure that every Australian, every citizen, along with our partners in our region, actually have the understanding and the tools to be strong, and that those that can protect should be protecting, not the individual. So we have the Executive Cyber Council, and that is industry, driving industry through government's important role in convening, but also we have, for example, a National Cyber Intelligence Partnership, where again, we're working with rapid threat sharing within sectors, across sectors, and working on ways that we can block those threats and get really ahead of the threats as they move so fast, faster than evolution of technology. So trust with our private sector is critical for it is a national issue for all of us.
So, Raimo, you also spoke earlier on about how you gradate some of these things and think about whether there's certain critical infrastructure that we need to secure a bit more. How do you think we should think about these issues, right? Between IT, OT, between critical information infrastructure, between non-CII, and across different types of infrastructure.
You mean public-private partnership?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we do have in Estonia also quite good public-private partnership in place. It means that we do have this type of security methods that what we are doing it is that we do provide to these vital services. What are the vital services like, I don't know, power grids and all that? We do provide for them as well as this type of help in order to implement their security measures. We are providing trainings, we are providing exercises, we are providing common exercises, which is this type of PPP, that we do quite a lot, this type of common exercises, and that helps very, very well.
Okay, that's quite useful. I wanted to give a bit of time also to talk about solutioning, right? And I also want to tap on the expertise that both Jerry as well as Sean have, right? Because oftentimes when governments or even many of us have to deploy or build some of these systems, we have to rely on the expertise of subject matter experts. So I wanted to get perhaps Jerry's views, right, on some of the cybersecurity frameworks and how we think about cybersecurity. So more recently, I think one of the concepts they've been deploying in many of our digital systems is the concept of zero trust. And to some extent, many of the things that we've been putting in place earlier on some of the standards of cybersecurity actually mirror this, right? How do we assume breaches? How do we think about risk mitigation, right? How do we constantly scan and detect? What are some of the other basic cyber hygiene things we need to do? But also making sure we stay vigilant to the correct risks. So maybe I could tap Jerry's brains on some of that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think Zero Trust is still at a very nascent stage, and it's still evolving quickly. And a lot of folks are focusing on applying the fundamental principles of Zero Trust on traditional legacy IT systems, such as securing our laptops, securing mobile devices, securing our cloud, and so on. But eventually, I believe some of the core principles of Zero Trust are applicable to cyber-physical systems as well. For those of you that are not familiar with Zero Trust, the concept behind Zero Trust is very simple. Never trust, always verify. And if you go a step further, it's based on 3 core pillars. One, obviously, is never trust, always verify. So continuous verification is the first pillar. The second pillar is granular access control. So making sure that you provide the minimum level of access authority for any access request. And then third is microsegmentation, so that even if a system is breached, you could limit or even prevent lateral movement within a system. And so those 3 pillars combined provide a very powerful concept. And in fact, it's so powerful, a lot of governments around the world, including Singapore, have started adopting very critical initiatives for fully embracing the principles of Zero Trust and applying it to their IT systems. Now at Samsung, we know that obviously security is critical for our consumers, but it's a necessity for our enterprise and government customers. And so I personally lead the B2B business within the MX division, Mobile Experience division at Samsung. And so I know from personal experience that the 3 most important things for our enterprise and government customers are security, security, security. And so the major initiative that I'm leading is Zero Trust. And to be a little bit more specific, I think Zero Trust is very different from our legacy security concepts because Zero Trust is not a single solution. It's not even a single platform. It's really, in my mind, it's a service. It's an end-to-end service where you have to secure every aspect of the information flow, starting from your endpoint, perhaps a mobile device, to an on-prem server, all the way up to the cloud. Everything has to be secured, which necessitates close collaboration, not only between governments and the private sector, but even among industry stakeholders like Huawei and Samsung, Google, Microsoft, Cisco, and so on. Obviously, at times, we're competitors, but we also need to work together to share best practices, share useful information, because at the end of the day, it has to be a holistic approach. To truly apply the Zero Trust concepts to pragmatic systems and devices, it has to be a team effort involving all stakeholders.
Yeah. Maybe I could seek Sean's views on this.
Yeah, I think Zero Trust is not a new concept. However, in the recent days, I see it getting more and more popular. And I would like to, using an enterprise point of view, to extend the Jerry's ideas. Yes, Zero Trust is getting more important, but also from another side, we need to think. And 2 things. One side, we would like to see as an enterprise, you need to think about what kind of asset you're protecting. So that's the reason why we see in one side is security is a part of the quality control. So which means then you know exactly how many key assets you have, and you know how many employees, how many peoples or contractors are your access to your asset, and you're managing the accessibility, the range, all of that. So we see asset and identity and access management. So from this point of view, and we can we're focused, not focused on attacker, we're focused on ourselves. So this one have a certainty, and we call this as a self-defense. Like a family, you know exactly how many cars you have, how many house you have, how many money in your bank account. You know how to protect your valuable asset. But also from another side, it's more like a OT, operation side. And honestly, a lot of enterprise, they're short of this kind of understanding or awareness. Why? Because you need to focus on attacker. You need to understand who are threat your asset. So we call this one is like a asset, vulnerability, and a threat. So this part, and you combine this one will be uncertainty because you don't know who will come in and attack you tomorrow, right? Combine these two things together, we see the zero trust is more like security by design. So from the beginning, you develop a system or develop your mechanism and to be safe. And from another side is like a cyber resilience against of all this kind of attack. So that one, and we see self-defense and also targetful attackers. And so combined together and can improve your safety. Yeah.
So again, to tap on both Jerry and Sean, right? So it's very easy for us to keep talking about security. We are at the cybersecurity panel, but normally my job is to deliver services at the lowest possible cost for my agencies, right? So that's why I do digital government. So how do we think about this balance between usability, cost, and security, right? There are many new technologies coming in. The citizens are demanding it. They go to the private sector. They see deployments that way. But of course, we deal with somewhat more sensitive services, right? So how do you think we should think about balancing this usability and cost issue? So I'd love to hear from both Jerry and Sean, but also Michelle and Raimo, if you have views on this, since we also deliver services.
Yes, I think that is probably all the decision makers, and we have to make a balance in the middle of usability, cost, and security. And sometimes, and especially for the security peoples, if there have nothing happen, and probably top senior executives may think it's not necessary to invest too much money on security. But once you really have a cyber attack, and they say, what you're doing and why you cannot protect enough security on top on the operations. And I would like to see if you see the different countries or different regions, they're doing the different things. The mainly difference is coming from the maturity of the digitalizations or intellectualizations. And for example, and we know, like Singapore, like Switzerland, and like other countries, they're pretty good on the security and also on the smart cities. So I think they do more activities on top of that. And actually, from technology point of view, let's see in the 3GPP, and they developed a red cap. It's named reduced capacity. So reduced capacity. So in reduced capacity, they're already using some kind of methodology to fit a different client. For example, we have standard smartphones. They're using the 5G new reduced technology. And also we know they also have a different protocols with reduce the antennas, reduce the spectrum, reduce the throughput, and to satisfy the thin client or thin device. So, and even for the narrowband IoT or passive IoT equipment, and trying to improve their efficiency. Because we know in the smart cities, they have all kinds of sensors, and the different sensors, they need a different resource or different calculation capabilities. Using a lot of this kind of methodologies, we can absolutely find a way to balance the security and cost. So this is one of those examples.
I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on this.
Maybe I can add that in our perspective, it is so that this question can be answered from risk perspective. It means that you need to do, in order to determine the safeguards and the level of the safeguards, how much I play, I need to do my risk analysis. And for example, very good are really the risk-based security standards, which help to determine, which gives a methodology how to do it. And if you do it through, then you get the answer. Easy as that.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely about risk, but over the last 2 years, millions and millions of Australians have been impacted, whether it's their private data, their health data, money from the bank accounts being scammed, to the point that it's actually just not okay to take unnecessary risk. And it has to be that we can achieve both, that we can drive efficiencies and accessibility through new technology while keeping our citizens safe. And I think it's increasingly at the front of our minds, and it requires a bit of a cultural change across society.
I absolutely agree with Michelle, because when it comes to many of these issues, while you can talk about the risk assessment, the question is whether the domain person or the person implementing it has a good sense of what the risks are. So I think they need to upgrade capabilities, ensure some basic level of hygiene. Then I think we can talk about what are the more specific risk management measures that we have to think about. I would like to actually open the dialogue now also to the floor, right? I think we spoke about a lot of topics already. We spoke firstly about the importance of smart cities and also cybersecurity in smart cities, right? We spoke about the role governments play in both regulation and balancing risks. We spoke about government, public-private partnership, right? Especially addressing incidents, but also in thinking about how do we regulate, what is the basic level of cyber hygiene. We spoke also about solutioning. What are some of the concepts you can actually apply to this? Rather than have to look at it system by system, are there some organizing frameworks like Zero Trust that we can think about, or even the more traditional CIA frameworks? Then finally, we spoke about how do we balance usability and cost. I think quite a number of questions have come in based on our earlier discussion. And the first question that has come in is actually on how do we collaborate, right? Because if you look at many cyber physical systems, oftentimes you're working across vendors across multiple countries. Some are local, the system integrator may well be local, but also, right, with MNCs across the globe, a global presence, and also we are not sure where exactly the data has gone. So maybe I could pick Michelle as well as Raimo's minds, right? How do you think governments can collaborate with local companies and also MNCs? What's a good way of doing this? And what are some of the things we should look out for when we collaborate with them on some of these cyber-physical solutions and also work with them on the cybersecurity aspects of these solutions?
Look, to start with, across our sovereign and domestic industry, I talk to our leaders about this is not an area for competition. When it comes to cybersecurity for national security and prosperity as a nation, this is an area for collaboration. So that's a key message. I think the question, really the heart of this question is what we can do, and Singapore International Cyber Week has brought us together as partners and regional friends and allies. It's really important when you talk about multinational companies, how do we set a standard that they can actually, that we can all agree on? I think with such a global supply chain and reliant on a number of biggest service providers, that we need to set that minimum standard and work with partners and like-mindeds to raise the bar that we can all benefit and not have too many bespoke requirements of those multinationals.
Okay, basically in Estonia, we do have several telcos and finance banks, which are really international ones. And we haven't had any problems to cooper. It doesn't really matter the borders of the because anyway, we do talk to them like there are no borders. let's put it this way, that I don't see any challenges. It means that the borders are nowadays not so important from my point of view. However, I agree that the local regulation, okay, we are also regulator, the local regulations apply, but everyone needs to be compliant, easy as that.
Yeah, so maybe I can move on to the next question, which is, it dropped off. Let me go back to the ones that. There was an earlier question actually about how many of how most of cybersecurity is much driven by regulations, right? And oftentimes it's focused most on the CII systems. However, I think it's not possible to regulate everything, and with cyber-physical systems which are increasingly complex, it's not possible to regulate every single component as a CII. So how do we think about this, right? Because it's quite easy to say CIIs need to be regulated, but when it comes to more across the board, especially with IoT becoming so pervasive. So Michelle spoke about more basic standards that you can put in place, but how do we encourage companies and etc. and also individual consumers to think about what is the right level of regulation to look at? So maybe I could ask Raimo to look at this.
What is the right level of, it's, okay, in Estonia, we do have it like they need to, it's a regulations that they need to make this risk-based estimation or risk-based standard through. And if they do calculate all this risk properly, in this case, they will get, based from the standards, they will get the level. And the right level is based on the risk. It means that if they do methodologically the risk-based assessment through, then they will get the right level. The standard is helping to do that.
Yeah, but you can do this for maybe CIIs, but I think it gets increasingly harder. So for example, a hospital, it may well be delivering important services. It will use many IoT devices because most medical devices are connected today. How should they think about the risk? Should they be regulated, or do we leave it to domain-specific
Yes, they are regulated. They are regulated, and exactly the same what I was explaining applies. They need to do it through, and they will get their answer through the methodology and through the standard. Yes.
So we have 11 sectors identified as critical infrastructure and around 168 systems of national significance, and we're identifying systems of government significance, and this is where we're partnering. This is not seen as, of course it is an imposition and a minimum standard, but we're partnering to understand risk and help elevate and secure those critical infrastructure which cross all critical sectors. At the heart of our success is trust. And trust is so important for government to continue to establish across not only the critical infrastructure as they are designated, but across industry. And that's a key feature of our strategy and our initiatives moving forward.
Right, okay. Let's move on to a question that was posed to Michelle, but I think is something that I will also welcome others to look at, right? Because our cybersecurity policies the policy and legislative cycle, right, is inherently longer than a technological development cycle. So how do you, as governments, right, how do we ensure that cybersecurity policies keep pace with emerging technology? So just now, Sean spoke about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles collect a lot of information. There are control systems associated with them. We used to subject vehicles to crash tests, safety tests, but we don't subject their cybersecurity systems, right? On the other hand, we aren't even sure what the risks are. There's no real standard for many of these things. How do we ensure that our policies keep pace with these emerging technologies?
I'm going to say on behalf of all of our governments, we try very hard to be agile and responsive, because this is a really dynamic space. To the exact question on EVs, this comes to the harmonisation and coherence of policy. Governments have multiple considerations around, and in this case, around climate, national security, efficiency. And so it's just really critical that we stay agile in our understanding, our collaboration with other international partners, and identify those minimum standards that keep us safe. Our consumers have expectations that it is clear about the vulnerabilities they may or may not be accepting when they purchase any device, software, hardware, IoT within their homes, in their garages. So it's a really important area that we seek to remain very dynamic and understand the threat and communicate it to the vendors, to the buyers, sorry.
Yeah, in Estonia it's so that, like I have several times mentioned, we have this cybersecurity standard, and the standard has different modules. For example, it has an IT module, or not IT module, different Windows, Linux, whatever, and OT module as well. And if we talk really about the specific safeguards which are needed for electric vehicles or this type of things, the standard is there is a new version every year. It means that yearly pace, there are coming new safeguards, new controls based on the new technologies. That is our way.
I see. Yeah, so maybe to build on that, right? There was a question for Raimo as well, right? But I think it's also a general one about capability building, right? So we spoke, if you wanted to ensure that everyone can do this risk assessment, I think everyone needs to have a basic awareness of cybersecurity, right? So I think maybe someone has actually read your cybersecurity yearbook. Maybe you can share some insights on how do we build this capability across the board?
No, okay, cybersecurity yearbook we do have, yes, we are publishing it yearly. Yeah. And yeah, that is roughly the overview of what we have seen and what risks and what actions we have seen there. And basically, because there is a ongoing war in Europe, and right now that spills over into our cyberspace. And a lot of actions what we do, what we see there in the yearbook, it actually tells that, for example, there are a lot of attacks what we see against our critical infrastructure. Also, what we have seen there is, for example, our DDoS surface has maybe quadrupled, 4 times more DDoSes than before the war. This type of things, what we are listing there in the yearbook.
Can I jump in on that question just for a second? Because I think it's really important when we talk about workforces, and I think skills are critical, but women in particular are incredibly underrepresented in this space. And I think it's super important that we figure out why. And for my money, it's absolutely, there is nothing, take it from an army officer, there is nothing masculine about the cybersecurity world. It is deeply intellectual, it is deeply challenging, and I think it behoves most of us to consider what kind of perceptions or environments we've set that make it an appealing and safe and welcoming space for young women. Because if we're going to harness this requirement across our nations, it's going to take the full diversity of all of us across neurodiversity, gender diversity, and also regional diversity. So if I can just not let that
Maybe I will extend the skills on the workforce. It means that we actually do have several, skills on the workforce. Anyway, training is the most obvious answer here. However, in addition to several levels of trainings, starting from the not only cyber specialists, but also a wide public, it means that we are also having targeted training campaigns to the wide public so that, and in addition, for example, one example is we also do provide in our public sector cyber tests so that it is mandatory of a servant to do the test and to have a positive result of the test. Otherwise, they cannot work in a...
Yes, we have the same policy too, and we also conduct phishing exercises. Yeah. And you'll be surprised at who actually ends up getting phished most frequently, right? Yeah, that is actually incredibly important, right? So one thing we do realize is that if you look at the list of cyber incidents, both on OT and IT, in Singapore at least, most of the time it's not very high-end APT hacks, It's typically just, do they practice basic cyber hygiene? Do they understand what does access control mean, right? And those are some of the issues that have led to compromises, more so than any of the other things that we looked at. Okay, I wanted to round over to our private sector participants, right? These devices are increasingly everywhere, right? IoT devices are increasingly everywhere. We recently launched a tender for lifts in a building that I happen to be on the board of, and there were none that were not connected to internet, right? I can't even get to lift nowadays without being connected to internet. So these smart home technologies are everywhere now. How do you think this would affect our overall security? And also, how do we manage security for our city?
Well, thank you for asking a relatively easy question. I mean, smart home, first of all, is a microcosm of a smart city. And obviously, a smart city is composed of smart homes, smart buildings, smart infrastructure. And if you look inside a typical smart house, you have smart devices, smart systems, and so on. And so basically, you need to look at this, I think, purely from a security point of view, you have to look at this a bottom-up approach as well as top-down. Now, if you look at this from a bottom-up approach, you need to first think about how do you actually create a secure house or secure home? And that is through secure devices, secure TV, secure refrigerator, whatever. And so that you're going to look at really device-centric security. And then you're going to look at how individual devices, when interworking with other devices, may cause vulnerabilities that have not been thought of before. And so in the end, when you want to really guarantee a high level of security for an entire city, you have to, I think, really look down at the individual components. Smart house, smart infrastructure, all the way down to smart devices. And so obviously for Samsung, we are currently focusing on making sure that we manufacture trustworthy devices.
Yeah. Sean, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the house is maybe the small particle of the city.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a smart city or secure smart city, absolutely you need to have a secure smart home as well. And for example, in the recent days, we see a lot of broadband networks are hacked or are attacked by the hackers, and absolutely will generate the panic for the whole cities. So just imagine if you have 100,000 house and lost connections, or even they lost the functional for your home appliance, will generate a lot of inconvenience, and even sometimes we generate even more panic into the cities. So, which is back to Jerry's point, and absolutely we need to develop a zero trust architectures. And sometimes we have to extend our capabilities. And for example, like Huawei, we are working on ICT, but now we are extending our security capability to the home appliance manufacturers, or maybe the rice makers or refrigerators or any other home appliance. They also need to build their capability on the security.
So unfortunately, it means that because interactions go up the square or n, the number of devices, it looks like we have a very complex problem headed for us, right? I wanted to bring us back to perhaps a question to round off the Q&A session. There are actually two main questions that I wanted to highlight, right? So first is one on the differences between how do we think about smart cities versus cybersecurity specifically, but also what do you think, what are your thoughts on the biggest challenge? So I wanted to invite all our panelists. So maybe I could start with first Sean, then Raimo, then Jerry, and perhaps Michelle could round off. On your thoughts on what are the biggest challenges, and what do you think are the biggest differences in your old role just doing cybersecurity versus now with all the devices connected and perhaps the attack surface and also the consequences of the risks expanding so much more?
Thank you, and it's not easy to answer these questions. First of all, I would like to see, in the recent days, we talked with several municipal government. I figured out, and they still have a lot of challenge because a lot of even advanced cities, but they have a lot of traditional digital applications, so which generate a lot of silos, information island. So it's hard for them to communicate or sharing this data. So I think that's the reason why, and more cities, they are paying attention to the data infrastructures, like a data cloud lake, or even the cloudifications to improve their capabilities. And if we say the number one challenge, and probably I would like to see, we need to refresh or reshape our understanding about data security. And you can see data now is also the foundation for AI. So if we do not have a clearly or clean data set, and it would be very dangerous for us to create accurate or right answers for the city brain. So that's one. Second one, I would like to see and pay high attention to the AI. And because now, if they have a massive IoT device, and they're not sensors, they are eyes, they're also arms. So if we think about, back to the topics about CPS, the cyber physical systems, so we need to pay high attention to that, because if we apply all this kind of artificial intelligence capability technologies on top of that, and we generate a lot of convenience or capability, however, we also bring more challenge for us. So from this point of view, we need to identify, just like Michelle just mentioned about, we need to identify or manage some kind of a industry like the CII, critical infrastructures, and then make a clearly standard and let people understand. And if you apply all this kind of AI or all this kind of new technologies on top of this kind of smart cities facilities, and what is the boundary or what is the safeguard or guardrail is. So I think that probably is, and that is things in my mind now. Yeah.
Okay. The challenge is, I think that I agree with you, of course. But anyway, something to add that maybe really the mindset of the OT and IT, that is a challenge. It means that what we see, maybe even, in IT, the new developments, they are already built security by design and all that. In OT domain, we don't see it yet. Maybe it comes after 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But anyway, I see that in addition to what you mentioned.
Oh, yeah, I fully agree with you. And one more thing. And there have a lot of analysis and disclosed 32% of the cyber failure or cyber attack was generated by weak password. So I would like to see in another document to say 70% of the cyber attack is because you do not have enough identity recognitions or access management or weak password. This is a traditional issue. So, and back to Raymond's ideas, I would like to see now we need to improve everybody. It's not only the municipal government, but also every enterprise, every house, every people's, their mindset to improve their understanding or awareness on OT or operations. So we see a lot of things, and they spend expensive money and finish the software development applications. However, they just short of the budget to do this kind of security operation and maintenance.
Yep.
So if this kind of things happens, it's hard for us to secure our smart cities. So I would like to see that is also a part, and which is the government can work more closely with private sectors and to improve the whole society's awareness on security.
Jerry?
So for me, the biggest challenge is pretty obvious, and I want to kind of refer back to one of the topics that came up earlier, and that is, I think we talked about the 3 dimensions that we need to consider, and that is obviously security, cost, and usability. And I would like to add a 4th dimension, user privacy.
Right.
Because sometimes user privacy are at odds with security. And I think here we're talking about securing an entire city. And so we're no longer talking about securing some CEO's phone or a particular server or even the cloud infrastructure. We're talking about securing an entire city, which basically affects everyone. And so even more than ever, making sure that we hit that optimal trade-off between security, privacy, cost, and usability is critically important, but very, very difficult. And I think we're going to go through a lot of mistakes, and we're going to also learn a lot from our past mistakes, lessons learned and so on. But I think at the end, to truly achieve a high level of security for an entire city, you need the right balance between those 4 factors. And that's going to be very, very difficult.
Michelle?
Look, I agree with everything the panel has said. There are deep foundations, simple things that every citizen, platform designer, software, device designer, industry, small business that need to do around MFA, software updates, secure passwords. There are some basics that will lift us all. When I think as a government at a more strategic issue around this, our challenge really is and it's solved through close partnership, but it's really understanding the very agile, evolving nature of the opportunities and the threats, and finding that right balance of when we legislate, when we regulate, and making sure we have the right connectivity and partnership with the experts across industry so that we land correctly and steer our nations to harness the amazing opportunities whilst securing our citizens.
So we are out of time apparently. So I just wanted to quickly round up. So I took a lot from this discussion, right? So firstly, I think everyone enunciated very clearly what are some of the risks, what are some of the things we need to consider. For the highest risk things, right, I think we can regulate very tightly, but also we need across the board, everyone to understand what are some of the basic cyber hygiene, what are some of the basic things, some of the basic concepts that we need so that we can actually secure the city as a whole. So for example, and from Sean, I took the idea that it's now not just about cybersecurity, right? It's also about safety because it's so across the board. From Raimo, the idea of risk tiering, how each of us actually need to understand what's going on around us and also just practice that same level of basic and upgrade the capability. Especially, I think in Estonia's case, you have a live, real, heightened threat happening right now, right? From Jerry's point of view, I think some of the ideas on making sure you do the right trade-offs, right? And being very conscious of the 4 factors that I think you spoke about. And finally, I think on Michelle's case, I think she very clearly made a very clear case for public-private partnership, for inclusion, for going across the board and tapping on all the resources we can to ensure that we can actually secure smart cities. So I want to thank all the panelists, I think, for your very insightful dialogues and for your conversation on this. So if there are no further questions, I think I'll just wrap up the dialogue at this juncture. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, speakers. Speakers, would you join us at the front of the stage for a photograph together, please? Just at the front of the stage, please. And we'd also like to invite Dr. Oberoi to join us on stage for this photograph, please. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, Dr. Oberoi, as well. You may exit the stage. Once again, a big thank you to our panelists for that discussion. Thank you to Mr. Sim as well for facilitating that discussion. Thank you, Dr. Oberoi, for your speech earlier. With that, we have come to the end of Securing Smart Cities. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. We hope you do leave this seminar with new insights, ideas, and connections to help address the challenges of securing smart cities. My name is Kim Anton. Thank you very much for your attendance and your attention today. Enjoy the rest of your day here at SICW, everyone. Thank you.